Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who shatter us the deepest. Pregnant wife announces divorce in front of the whole family. Cheating, millionaire husband, panics high ceilings and polished marble floors couldn't hide the tension brewing within the Wellington estate. For years, Isabella Harrington played the perfect hostess, always gracious, always dutiful, while her husband Nathaniel Nate Harrington radiated charm and power as a self-made millionaire. But on this fateful night, with the entire Harrington clan gathered for a celebratory family dinner, Isabella's composure would shatter in front of everyone. A single declaration punctuated by the gasp of guests and the furious drumming of her own heart would lay bare a devastating betrayal in a matter of seconds. The public image of a golden couple would implode, and nothing would ever be the same. Nathaniel Harrington was the pride of his family, born to Richard and Eleanor Harrington. Caring parents who nurtured his early entrepreneurial spirit, Nate excelled in school, sports, and social circles. By 25, he had launched his first successful tech consultancy firm. A series of savvy real estate deals and investments followed soon. He was not just wealthy, but recognized in high-powered circles across the state. Word of his achievements spread quickly, and the Harringtons reveled in the limelight of having a self-made millionaire son. Isabella Bennett Harrington was an elegant counterbalance to Nate's boundless energy. She was the daughter of Dr. William Bennett, a renowned cardiologist, and Margaret Bennett, an accomplished pianist. Isabella grew up surrounded by music, academic discussions, and an emphasis on kindness. Above all else, she had studied business communications, and after graduation, she took a position at a rising tech firm, one of Nate's earliest ventures. He noticed her calm intelligence and the way she carried herself with understated confidence. They soon fell into a whirlwind romance. Their wedding was the stuff of glossy magazine spreads, a lavish ceremony at the Cambridge Country Club, surrounded by over 500 guests. Pictures showed Isabella in a gown of delicate lace, radiant with hope, and Nate beaming beside her. Their honeymoon in the Maldives became a social media sensation among their well-connected friends. From the outside, they were the ultimate power couple driven by love and ambition. Although Isabella exuded confidence and grace, she also harbored a deep belief in the ideal of everlasting love. She clung to the notion that true love could weather any storm, often brushing aside early signs of distance or change with a stubborn hopefulness. In doing so, she unknowingly contributed to the widening gap between herself and Nate. Yet beneath the veneer of fairy tale romance, cracks began to form. Nate's relentless pursuit of business deals meant he was constantly traveling, shuttling between conferences in London, property showings in Los Angeles, and investor summits. In New York, Isabella tried to keep pace. Organizing charity fundraisers, hosting formal dinners, and managing a portion of Harrington Enterprises' philanthropic wing. She was praised as the gracious wife who held everything together. In truth, she felt increasingly isolated. Once upon a time, Isabella and Nate had whispered to each other about building a large, close-knit family. But as the months turned into years and business obligations devoured more of Nate's time, those talks dwindled. Sometimes, Isabella would find herself eating alone in their vast dining room, the clink of silverware echoing through an empty house. Worse still were the lingering suspicions, late-night calls from unknown numbers, unexplained absences that Nate shrugged off as last-minute deals, and the faint smell of perfume that was not hers on his suit jackets. Isabella wanted to believe in the man she married, that he was honest and true. She clung to her faith in him, telling herself that no relationship was perfect and that she simply had to be patient. However, intuition can only be suppressed for so long. Deep in her heart, Isabella knew something was very wrong. She could sense the truth creeping closer, threatening to shatter the illusion of perfection they had so carefully cultivated. Isabella wasn't the only one who sensed the growing tension. Members of the Harrington family, especially Nate's sister Olivia, noticed how Isabella's smiles never quite reached her eyes anymore. Olivia, a no-nonsense attorney with an instinct for reading people, confided in her fiancé Daniel Foster about the shift in Isabella's demeanor. She suspected Nate was hiding something, but had no proof, and frankly worried about inserting herself into her brother's private affairs without solid evidence. Meanwhile, Isabella's parents, Dr. William and Margaret Bennett, watched from the sidelines with increasing concern. They had always admired Nate's drive and generosity. After all, he had set up a scholarship fund in their name supporting underprivileged youths. Yet they also saw how often Isabella visited them alone, seldom mentioning Nate unless prodded. Whenever William attempted to ask about her marriage, she'd deflect the question with a smile and a vague reassurance that everything's fine. Margaret, more intuitive, saw through these placations. She suspected heartbreak, but patiently waited for her daughter to open up behind closed doors. Isabella wrestled with her growing suspicions. She tried to find logical explanations for Nate's late-night phone calls. Maybe he was just dealing with overseas partners. She told herself that unexpected trips out of town were a normal part of high-stakes business, but as the signs grew more glaring, the flimsy justifications unraveled. An unknown earring found in Nate's car console. Receipts for lavish dinners in restaurants Isabella had never visited. These clues weighed heavily on her mind. Then came the day. Isabella discovered a glaring text message on Nate's phone while it was left charging in their study. The message was from someone named Vanessa Cruz, reading, "Can't wait to see you again tonight." Isabella felt her heart lurch, her breath catching in her throat. When she confronted Nate about it, he dismissed it as a colleague joking around. He insisted that Vanessa was a business associate from Los Angeles, and the text meant nothing personal, but the hollow ring of his excuses did little to quell Isabella's mounting fear. She sought solace in her best friend, Sophia Lynn. A PR specialist who lived nearby, Sophia urged her to keep calm, gather evidence, and not jump to conclusions. "Get to the bottom of it before making any rash decisions," Sophia advised, stroking Isabella's hand sympathetically. "You deserve the truth." Whatever it is, despite Sophia's counsel, Isabella's anxiety grew unbearable. She felt as though she were living a half-life, constantly questioning her reality, torn between loyalty to the man she loved and the growing suspicion that he was betraying her. Little did she know a family gathering was on the horizon, one that would bring all her fears and the truth into devastating focus. The storm clouds were gathering, and Isabella's heart told her a reckoning was inevitable. Nate's mother, Eleanor Harrington, was a warm, sociable matriarch who believed in keeping family bonds strong. She planned an elaborate family dinner to celebrate her 60th birthday, inviting everyone from close relatives to dear family friends. The guest list included Isabella's parents, Dr. William and Margaret Bennett, plus Sophia Lynn, who was practically a part of the extended Harrington clan. Also in attendance would be Nate's longtime business associates, including Gregory Hartman, his real estate partner, and Gregory's wife, Emily. The Harringtons loved grand celebrations, live music, gourmet catering, even local press coverage to capture the Power family's event. For Isabella, the invitation arrived on a day she'd spent rifling through Nate's financial statements. She'd found invoices for expensive jewelry, necklaces, bracelets, and rings that she had never seen or received. Her body went cold as dread took root. Either Nate was making extravagant purchases for business reasons, or he was showering gifts on someone else. She swallowed her suspicions, forcing herself to remain composed. The upcoming family celebration loomed like a behemoth. She knew it would be insufferable to put on a happy face, but part of her believed that in a gathering of so many, the truth might slip out. There were moments, late at night when the house was silent and vast, that Isabella felt like a ghost in her own life. She moved through beautiful rooms decorated with exquisite taste, yet everything felt hollow, as if the walls themselves were conspiring to remind her of the love slowly slipping away. Even the laughter and warmth she once cherished now seemed like distant echoes of a dream she could no longer touch. Still, she clung stubbornly to the hope that maybe, just maybe, she was wrong. Nate, oblivious to the depth of Isabella's distress, or perhaps willfully ignoring it, put on his usual confident air as the big night approached. He arranged the best caterers in the city, and even hired a string quartet for ambiance in the Wellington Estate's Great Hall. Antique chandeliers sparkled overhead, and staff bustled about, setting up tables with fine china and gleaming silverware. Isabella threw herself into the details as well, assisting Eleanor in picking floral arrangements, tasting wines, and selecting hors d'oeuvres. On the surface, Isabella seemed the perfect hostess. Beneath that calm facade, her mind churned with 1,000 unanswered questions. She'd glimpsed Nate's phone again, seeing multiple calls and texts to Vanessa Cruz. Each time her heart sank further. Why was he doing this? Was their marriage nothing more than a facade for him? Or was he simply caught in some web he couldn't escape? A few days before the dinner, Isabella confided her suspicions to Sophia over coffee in a chic cafe downtown. Sophia listened intently, occasionally shaking her head in dismay. "You need conclusive proof," Sophia said, her voice low yet firm. "I know you have your suspicions, the receipts and those texts, but if you confront him publicly and he manages to spin it, you'll look like the paranoid wife. You need something undeniable." That night, Isabella could hardly sleep. She pictured the grand dining table, a parade of impeccably dressed guests, and the moment when she would lock eyes with Nate and realize she knew the truth. A part of her still hoped she was wrong. Maybe it was all one big misunderstanding, but her gut told her otherwise. Unbeknownst to Isabella, events were aligning in a way that would force her hand. The family gathering would not pass quietly. It would become a stage upon which every secret, every lie, and every unspoken doubt would come crashing down in front of them. Vanessa Cruz was not just a random fling. She was a striking and ambitious woman with a fiery determination that matched Nate Harrington's. Born to a working-class family in Los Angeles, Vanessa had clawed her way up the social ladder. She started as a receptionist at a luxury condo development firm, then quickly learned the ropes of high-end real estate. Possessing charm and formidable negotiation skills, she eventually branched out to form her own small agency. That was how she met Nate, a major investor in one of the properties she managed. Their business relationship was straightforward at first, working on deals, showings, and promotional events. But spark by spark, the lines blurred. Vanessa found in Nate a mentor, a gatekeeper to a world of limitless opportunity. Nate, in turn, was drawn to her ambition and undeniable magnetism. Late-night strategy sessions over dinner evolved into flirtation before either of them fully grasped it. They had tumbled into an affair. Vanessa knew Nate was married, yet she justified the relationship as part of the cutthroat environment of high-end real estate. She told herself that if Nate wasn't happy in his marriage, who was she to stand in the way of his pursuit of something more fulfilling? Over time, however, Vanessa began to suspect that she was just another conquest for him. Nate never spoke of leaving Isabella, never introduced Vanessa to his social circle. He gifted her jewelry, took her to exclusive hotels, and offered sweet words of affection. But Vanessa noticed how carefully he hid her from every public aspect of his life. In the weeks leading up to Eleanor Harrington's birthday celebration, Vanessa felt Nate becoming more distant. He was responding to texts less frequently, citing family obligations whenever they met. She sensed a tension in him. One night, in a luxurious penthouse suite overlooking the ocean, she finally confronted Nate. "You're pulling away," she accused, crossing her arms. "We used to talk every day, see each other whenever we could. Now you're busy all the time." Nate looked away, vaguely ashamed. "There's a big family event coming up," he said, running a hand through his hair. "It's stressing me out. My mom's 60th birthday dinner. It's a big deal and I have to be there." "It's not the right time to cause waves, Vanessa," Nate said. Vanessa pursed her lips. "And what happens after this dinner? Are we going to keep doing this dance forever? You either want me in your life or you don't. I'm tired of being a secret." Nate sighed, evading her piercing stare. "We'll talk about it after the party," he promised. "I just need you to understand that my family is very traditional. Springing this on them, it's complicated." Despite her misgivings, Vanessa allowed herself to believe him, at least for the moment. She told herself that she was on the verge of something bigger, a new life with Nate. Little did she know that fate was about to intervene in a way none of them could have predicted, forcing every buried truth out into the open. With the date of Eleanor Harrington's birthday celebration drawing near, the Wellington estate bustled with controlled chaos. Florists streamed in and out carrying crates of peonies, hydrangeas, and roses. The catering team delivered supplies from dawn until dusk, and decorators draped the mansion in tasteful arrangements of silver and cream fabrics. A harpist and a string quartet rehearsed quietly in the expansive living room, their melodies drifting through the corridors. Isabella supervised much of the setup, but her mind was elsewhere. Her eyes were distant. Her thoughts were laced with anxiety. Occasionally, she would catch a fleeting glimpse of Nate rushing through the hallway, phone pressed to his ear. Each time she wondered if he was speaking to Vanessa. She gritted her teeth, reminding herself that she still lacked ironclad proof of the affair. It was maddening knowing in her heart that something was terribly wrong, yet being forced to maintain appearances for the sake of family harmony. Every polite nod, every practiced smile felt like a mask stretched tight across a face that was crumbling inside. Isabella moved through the preparations as if wading through a heavy mist, her senses dulled by the constant battle between duty and despair. Each arrangement she approved, each guest she welcomed, deepened the ache of pretending that her world wasn't quietly falling apart. In the days leading up to the event, Isabella tried one last time to speak openly with Nate. Late in the evening, she found him in his study, hunched over a stack of files. She cleared her throat, drawing his attention. "Nate, can we talk?" she asked softly, her voice quivering with suppressed emotion. He looked up, caught off guard by the vulnerability in her tone. "Sure," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "What's on your mind?" Isabella settled into a chair opposite him, wringing her hands. She felt the words on the tip of her tongue. "I know about Vanessa Cruz. I found those texts. I know about the gifts." But fear constricted her throat. She couldn't bring herself to hurl accusations without the final shred of proof Sophia had advised her to secure. Instead, she stammered, Are you happy with me? With us?" A flicker of discomfort crossed Nate's face. "Of course I'm happy," he replied, perhaps a bit too quickly. "We have a good life, Isabella. I'm just stressed. There's a lot riding on this new business deal. My mother's party is also a big deal. You know how she is about appearances." Isabella nodded numbly, feeling a surge of anger that he was so adept at deflection. Their entire marriage was apparently about appearances. In that moment, Isabella realized she wasn't truly asking for reassurance. She was grasping for a memory of the man she once believed Nate to be, even as the reality of who he had become loomed starkly before her. Realizing she wouldn't get a genuine confession, she forced a smile and stood to leave. "I hope it all goes well," she said, trying not to betray her frustration. Nate watched her go, a faint frown creasing his forehead. Deep down, he sensed that he was losing Isabella in ways he couldn't fully articulate. Yet he also felt trapped by his own choices. The affair with Vanessa, initially thrilling, was now threatening the stability of his marriage, his entire life. As the night of the party drew closer, the tension that simmered between them would only escalate. All the meticulous preparations, all the lavish planning, none of it could prevent the catastrophe that would soon unfold for the Harringtons. The night of Eleanor Harrington's 60th birthday celebration finally arrived. Guests began trickling through the massive double doors of the Wellington estate at sunset. Limousines pulled up the circular driveway, depositing family members dressed to the nines and business associates eager to rub elbows with one of the state's most prominent families. A sense of grandiosity pervaded the air, each new arrival marveling at the elegant decor and greeting Eleanor with warm congratulatory smiles. Isabella stood near the entrance, welcoming each guest with a practiced cordiality she had honed over the years. Every handshake, every compliment she offered felt mechanical, her soul detached from the pageantry she once genuinely embraced. Her parents, Dr. William and Margaret Bennett, arrived early, offering her gentle hugs and searching glances that asked, "Are you all right?" She forced a smile, assuring them she was fine, even as her stomach churned with dread. Shortly thereafter, Nate's sister, Olivia Harrington, swept in wearing a midnight blue gown. Her fiancé, Daniel Foster, carried a bouquet of orchids for Eleanor. "You look beautiful," Olivia whispered to Isabella, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "But you also look stressed. Everything okay?" "I'm just tired," Isabella lied softly, willing her eyes not to glisten with tears. "You know how these events can be hectic." The parade of arrivals continued. The last to enter was Gregory Hartman and his wife Emily. Gregory embraced Nate with a hearty laugh. "Nate, you outdid yourself this time," he remarked, eyeing the floral arrangements and the glittering chandeliers. Nate merely grinned, though his smile wavered slightly when Gregory mentioned, "Heard you've been in Los Angeles quite a bit. Busy times?" Nate's eyes flickered toward Isabella, who was politely chatting with another guest a few feet away. He mumbled something about real estate deals, his discomfort evident. As the evening progressed, the celebration flowed effortlessly. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and canapés. The string quartet played a waltz that had a few couples swaying gently near the grand piano. Eleanor glowed in a silver gown, graciously accepting birthday toasts and the adoration of her loved ones. Isabella drifted from group to group, exchanging pleasantries, though her mind was barely present. She replayed every suspicious moment. The texts, the jewelry receipts, the untraceable calls. When Sophia Lynn finally arrived, Isabella breathed a sigh of relief. Sophia squeezed her arm in solidarity, whispering, "Stay strong. If the moment comes, you'll know what to do," Sophia had whispered, and then the moment that Isabella had secretly dreaded became reality. As she turned to greet a latecomer by the door, she froze, heart pounding in her chest. Vanessa Cruz, radiant in a crimson cocktail dress, stepped into the foyer. Her gaze immediately locked with Nate's. He paled visibly, nearly dropping his champagne flute. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face, while Sophia's eyes widened in shock. Vanessa stood tall, her posture proud, but uncertainty flickered in her expression as she realized she had walked into a family event of enormous consequence. In that charged moment, it became crystal clear that the secret affair had collided head-on with reality, and that the night's carefully orchestrated celebration was about to transform into a battleground of truth and betrayal. A nauseating wave of betrayal washed over Isabella, nearly buckling her knees. She had imagined confronting this reality 100 times in her mind, but nothing could have prepared her for the raw humiliation of seeing her husband's mistress step brazenly into their sacred family space. Guests who noticed Vanessa Cruz's entrance were initially clueless about the impending drama. Some assumed she was an acquaintance or colleague of Nate's. A few recognized her from real estate networking events, though no one openly suspected the depth of her relationship with the evening's co-host. But Isabella knew in an instant who Vanessa was and why she was here. For a moment, Isabella's body went rigid. 1,000 thoughts swirled. Had Nate invited her? Did she come unannounced? Across the room, Nate looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting between Vanessa, Isabella, and his mother Eleanor, who was chatting happily with other guests. The music played on, an incongruous melody underscoring the sudden tension. Vanessa's gaze swept the grand hall, taking in the opulence. Her confidence faltered slightly under the appraising stares. Summoning her composure, she strode forward, stopping just a few feet away from Isabella. Sophia, sensing the mounting tension, took a subtle step closer to her friend. Isabella's voice trembled as she finally spoke. "Good evening," she said, forcing the most polite tone she could manage. "I don't believe we expected you tonight." Vanessa lifted her chin, pushing aside her nerves. "I didn't realize this was such a private family gathering," she replied, her words carefully measured. "I was under the impression this was a more inclusive celebration. I apologize if I've intruded." Nate approached swiftly, placing himself between the two women. "Vanessa, this is my wife, Isabella," he said, a hint of desperation in his voice. Then, turning to Isabella, he continued, "She's one of my business associates from Los Angeles. We've been working on some deals together." Isabella's gaze flickered to him, noting the strain in his features. She forced a tight smile. "Of course." "Well, pleased to meet you," she said. Inside, her heart felt like it was about to hammer its way out of her chest. Every beat seemed to echo the words she couldn't yet say, vibrating through her ribs like a ticking clock counting down to inevitable collapse. "This woman dares to show up at my mother-in-law's birthday party." Sensing the awkward atmosphere, Sophia intervened, offering Vanessa a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "So, Vanessa," Sophia began, "what brings you to the city? Strictly business? Or do you have family here as well?" Before Vanessa could answer, Eleanor Harrington approached, curious about the newcomer. "Nate, dear, who is this young lady?" Eleanor asked graciously. Nate swallowed hard. "Mother, this is Vanessa Cruz, a contact from my Los Angeles projects. She heard about the party, I suppose, and decided to stop by." Eleanor gave a polite nod. "Always glad to meet a friend of my son. Enjoy yourself." Isabella wanted to scream at the absurdity of it all. A friend, a business associate. She clenched her fists, feeling the intensity of the moment spike her adrenaline. Her fingernails dug into her palms so sharply that she half expected to see blood, yet the physical pain barely registered against the tidal wave of emotional agony inside her. Every nerve in her body itched to confront them both right then and there, but she knew that a public scene would irreversibly tarnish Eleanor's big night. And so, she swallowed her rage, resolving to keep her composure for the remainder of the cocktail hour. Isabella watched warily as Vanessa moved through the crowd, occasionally exchanging tense glances with Nate. It was as though every piece of Isabella's suspicion was falling into place, painting a vivid, damning picture. The real question was, how long could she endure this charade before she finally snapped? Dinner was announced shortly thereafter, and guests took their places at the extravagantly set tables in the mansion's opulent dining room. Each table gleamed with crystal silverware and elaborate centerpieces of white roses. Isabella found herself seated at the head table next to Nate, with Eleanor Harrington at the center. To Isabella's silent outrage, Vanessa ended up at a nearby table, within direct line of sight. The first course arrived, an artfully plated lobster bisque. Conversation buzzed around the room, but Isabella barely touched her food. Every so often she caught Vanessa gazing at Nate, and her husband returning furtive glances filled with tension. Isabella's temples pounded with every subtle exchange. They thought no one else noticed. Sophia, seated across from Isabella, shot her a sympathetic look. To onlookers, the Harrington family dinner exuded splendor and unity. Toasts were raised to Eleanor's health and happiness. Classical music drifted in from the quartet in the adjoining salon. Yet under that veneer, the undercurrents of betrayal and suspicion raged. To Isabella, every toast felt like a cruel joke, every clinking glass a hollow mockery of the love and loyalty she had once believed unbreakable. Isabella found herself torn. Part of her wanted to stand up, shout the truth, and expose Nate's lies. Another part hesitated, remembering Sophia's words about getting definitive proof. But how much more proof did she need than the living, breathing woman who dared to attend this family function? Midway through dinner, Isabella noticed Vanessa quietly slip out of the dining room. Moments later, Nate excused himself, claiming a phone call from a business partner. Isabella's heart clenched. She waited 30 seconds, then put down her napkin and murmured to Eleanor that she needed to check on something in the kitchen. In reality, she followed the path Nate had taken, down a corridor leading to a side balcony. What she saw when she reached the balcony door left her breathless with rage. Hidden by the shadows, Nate and Vanessa stood intimately close, locked in a low, heated conversation. Isabella couldn't hear the exact words, but their body language spoke volumes. Vanessa's hand was on Nate's chest, his arm around her waist, their faces just inches apart. A choking sense of betrayal overtook Isabella. This was beyond a suspicious text or an unexplained receipt. This was a brazen display of infidelity under the very roof where she slept. For several seconds she remained frozen, her eyes stinging with furious tears. It was as if the floor beneath her feet gave way, leaving her suspended in a freefall of heartbreak and rage she could neither control nor conceal. Then she spun on her heel and returned to the dining room, chest heaving, mind spinning with a singular resolution. This has to end tonight. Reclaiming her seat felt like an out-of-body experience. She forced a brittle smile at her father's concern and waved off Sophia's worried questions. No, she would not make a scene. Not before the entire family. But she knew the moment would come soon, because once the last dessert plate was cleared, she planned to take back her dignity, no matter the cost. And if that meant shattering the Harrington family's carefully polished image in the process, then so be it. After dessert, a decadent tiramisu served with espresso, the guests gradually drifted to the mansion's ornate drawing room. Here, Eleanor Harrington was expected to make a speech thanking everyone for attending and toasting to her milestone birthday. The room itself was a study in elegance. Velvet drapes, a marble fireplace, and portraits of long-departed ancestors. The string quartet set up in the corner, readying a gentle melody as people mingled. Isabella stood by the grand piano, Sophia by her side, bracing for the inevitable explosion she felt was coming. She glimpsed Nate hovering near the fireplace, anxiously checking his phone, while Vanessa lingered at the edge of the crowd. Dr. William and Margaret Bennett had retreated to a quieter corner, sipping coffee, clearly sensing their daughter's distress. Olivia Harrington chatted with other relatives, but periodically shot Nate a piercing glare, as if she suspected something was afoot. When Eleanor signaled for everyone's attention, the chatter died down. The matriarch stood elegantly in front of the assembled guests, smiling warmly. "I want to thank you all for celebrating my 60th birthday with me," she began, her voice wavering with emotion. "It means the world that my friends, my family, especially my wonderful son Nate and his lovely wife Isabella could be here tonight. My husband, Richard, may he rest in peace, would have been so proud to see us all together." She raised her glass, and the guests followed suit in a toast. Isabella felt a deep pang of guilt. Eleanor was a kind woman who had embraced her as a daughter. The knowledge that she was about to shatter this fragile joy sliced through Isabella like a blade. But the alternative, living a lie, was a prison she could no longer endure. "But your son is tearing my heart apart," Isabella thought bitterly, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She clinked glasses mechanically, the champagne turning to ash in her throat. Just as Eleanor finished her speech, Sophia nudged Isabella, her eyes filled with compassion. "If you need to do this," Sophia whispered, "then do it. I'm here." Isabella swallowed hard. The entire room was still buzzing with applause for Eleanor. Now would be the time, if she wanted her declaration to slice through the ambience like a lightning bolt. With trembling hands, she stepped forward, her voice catching in her throat before she summoned the courage to speak. "Everyone," Isabella began, her tone surprisingly steady, "may I have your attention for a moment?" The applause died down and heads turned toward her. Nate stiffened, visibly clutching his glass so tightly his knuckles whitened. Vanessa looked on with a worried expression, her posture tense. Eleanor, puzzled, inclined her head gently toward Isabella, signaling for her to go on. Isabella forced herself to breathe. Her gaze swept across the crowd, pausing on her parents, Sophia, Olivia, and finally Nate. She could feel her heart hammering in her chest, but she spoke clearly, her voice echoing in the hush that enveloped the drawing room. "I have an announcement to make," she said, her face set in grim determination, "and I need everyone here, especially the Harrington family, to hear it." In that charged moment, Isabella felt an odd calm, as though she were standing on the precipice of a long-awaited decision. She was no longer the woman clinging to fragments of a broken dream. She was someone forging her own truth, no matter how much it hurt. Everything she had endured, the sleepless nights, the suspicions, the pain, would now burst forth, one way or another. The pretense was about to end. A tense hush settled over the drawing room as Isabella steadied herself. Every pair of eyes was fixed on her, from family members to close friends to staff discreetly lining the walls. Nate shifted uneasily, glancing at Vanessa, who stood near the edge of the gathering with a wary expression. Sophia offered Isabella a supportive nod, and Dr. William Bennett gently placed an arm around Margaret, as if sensing a storm was about to erupt. Isabella's voice rang out, surprisingly firm. "First, I want to say how much I care for this family, my in-laws, my dear mother-in-law Eleanor, and all of you who have become part of our lives. But I can't continue to pretend everything is fine when it isn't." She paused, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Nate and I have been married for almost 8 years. In that time, I believed we were building a life founded on trust and love. But recently, I've discovered that my husband hasn't been faithful to me." A collective gasp rippled across the room. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes darting to Nate in disbelief. Olivia set down her glass a bit too forcefully, her eyes flashing with indignation. Nate stepped forward, looking panicked. "Isabella, wait, let's talk about this in private," he pleaded, his voice taut. Isabella ignored him. She held out a stack of papers she had tucked under her arm. "I've gathered evidence, financial statements showing expensive jewelry, hotel receipts, phone records, and I've seen with my own eyes the woman who's been accompanying him on these secret trips. She's here tonight. In fact," Isabella said, her voice cutting through the silence. All eyes swung to Vanessa, who flushed under the relentless stares. A murmur of shock and condemnation spread through the crowd. Vanessa tried to maintain her composure, but her cheeks burned. She glanced at Nate, who seemed paralyzed by indecision. "Please." Nate's voice trembled. "Isabella, this isn't the right place or time." Isabella cut him off, her voice resolute. "The right time to betray me was never, Nate. And yet here we are. I refuse to be humiliated in private while you parade your affair in front of me. I am done." She turned her focus to the gathering, tears glistening but not falling. "I've decided to file for divorce. I'm announcing it here in front of everyone. So there's no more pretending, no more lies. The man I thought I knew is not the man standing before me." The words tasted like ashes on her tongue, each syllable stripping away the last fragile threads of the life she had once believed unshakable. As the guests gasped at Isabella's words, another voice cut through the murmurs. "I can confirm that." A deep voice called from the back of the room. All heads turned toward a sharply dressed man stepping forward. Carter Blake, a high-profile real estate developer who had worked with Nate in Los Angeles. Nate's face drained of color. "Carter, this isn't." Carter held up a hand, stopping him. "Don't even try, Nate. I've seen you and Vanessa together more times than I can count. Fancy dinners, weekend getaways, luxury hotel suites. You weren't exactly discreet." Isabella turned to Nate with a look of quiet devastation. "So it was never just business, was it?" Vanessa, standing at the edge of the room, seemed frozen in place. Carter's words had sealed the truth before she even had a chance to defend herself. A stunned silence followed, broken only by the distant strains of classical music still playing in the adjacent room. Eleanor stumbled backward, sinking into a nearby armchair, shock etched across her features. Dr. William Bennett wrapped an arm around his wife, who was visibly shaken. Sophia discreetly placed a supportive hand on Isabella's shoulder, a silent testament to her friend's courage. Nate tried to approach Isabella, but she recoiled, tears now slipping freely down her cheeks, though her voice remained steady. "You've left me no choice," she whispered. "I won't remain in a marriage built on deceit and infidelity." It wasn't just a relationship dying in that moment. It was the funeral of every hope, every promise, every silent vow they had ever shared. Olivia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished marble floor. "Enough, Nate," she snapped. Nate turned to his sister, his expression pleading. "Olivia, stay out of this." "No," she interrupted. "I won't. I've watched you lie to everyone, pretending to be the perfect husband while Isabella suffered in silence. And now that you've been caught, you expect us to just move on?" Nate looked around, searching for an ally, but none of his family members met his gaze. Even their mother, Eleanor, sat in stunned silence. Olivia's voice turned icy. "You didn't just betray your wife, you betrayed this entire family, and the worst part, you don't even seem sorry." Isabella exhaled shakily, surprised by Olivia's support. For the first time that evening, Nate seemed to realize how alone he truly was. And for the first time, Isabella realized that she wasn't the one abandoned. He was. And with that final statement, Isabella Harrington, once the gracious, patient wife, stepped away, determined to reclaim her dignity, no matter the cost. The instant Isabella's announcement concluded, it was as if a dam burst in the Wellington estate. Voices rose in confusion, anger, and disbelief. Eleanor Harrington, mortified and heartbroken, clutched her chest. She had anticipated a joyous night celebrating her birthday with family and friends. Never could she have imagined her son's marriage imploding before her eyes. Olivia Harrington stepped in, her legal mind racing. "Isabella, if there's been wrongdoing, you'll need representation," she began. But Isabella, tears streaking her cheeks, merely nodded numbly. Olivia then rounded on Nate, her voice quivering with anger. "You knew how important family is to Mom. How could you do this, Nate?" Nate, visibly shaken, barely mastered a coherent response. I never meant for this to happen," he stammered, darting desperate glances at Isabella. "I made a mistake. We can work this out." But the raging storm of indignation around him made it difficult to be heard. Close relatives peppered him with questions, demands for explanations he couldn't satisfactorily provide. Vanessa Cruz, caught in the crossfire, attempted to slip out of the drawing room unnoticed. But Sophia Lynn intercepted her. "Leaving so soon?" Sophia asked pointedly, eyes narrowing as whispers filled the room. Vanessa's phone vibrated in her clutch. She hesitated before glancing at the screen. An unknown number. I miss you, baby. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was unforgettable. Her heart stopped. Last night, she had been with Nate just 2 nights ago. She quickly typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. Funny, that's what I should be asking you. Vanessa's fingers trembled as realization sank in. Nate wasn't just unfaithful to his wife. He was playing her too. She looked up at him, her anger boiling over. "You son of a," she whispered. Isabella caught the exchange and raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong, Vanessa?" For the first time that night, Vanessa had nothing to say. She flinched under Sophia's gaze. I didn't realize the severity of this situation," Vanessa muttered. "I'll go." Sophia let her pass, but not without a look that clearly conveyed her contempt. Meanwhile, Dr. William Bennett approached his daughter, wrapping her in a protective hug. Isabella sobbed against her father's shoulder, her adrenaline-fueled composure finally breaking. The weight of lost dreams crashed down on her at last, and for a few precious moments, she allowed herself the fragile mercy of mourning everything that would never be. Margaret Bennett rubbed her daughter's back, whispering reassurance. Sophia hovered close by, offering tissues and moral support. Eleanor Harrington struggled to regain her composure enough to intervene. "Please, everyone," she said, her voice cracking. "This is a private matter. Let's not turn it into a spectacle." But it was too late. The spectacle had already begun. Some guests excused themselves hurriedly, eager to escape the uproar. Others lingered in shock, unsure how to react or whether their presence was still welcome. Amid the chaos, Nate attempted to approach Isabella again. This time, Dr. William Bennett stepped between them. "Now is not the moment," he warned, his voice stern, his eyes cold. "My daughter has made her position clear." "Isabella, please," Nate implored, trying to sidestep her father, his face a portrait of panic. "We can go somewhere private and talk. I can explain." Isabella stood resolute, her tears subsiding into weary acceptance. "There's nothing to explain," she replied in a trembling voice. "You've shown me who you are, and I believe you." The finality of her words hung heavy in the air, a guillotine severing whatever fragile bonds remained between them. She turned away, seeking solace in Sophia and her mother's presence in the corner of the room. Vanessa was already gone, leaving only a hushed trail of scandalized whispers in her wake. For Eleanor, the night was an absolute nightmare. Her birthday overshadowed by betrayal, and for Isabella, it was the first step toward reclaiming her sense of self, even if that step came wrapped in heartbreak and public humiliation. In the days following the catastrophic birthday celebration, the Wellington estate felt like a mausoleum. The once gleaming corridors were hushed, the staff tiptoeing around a family in ruins. Eleanor Harrington, shaken to the core, had sequestered herself in her private suite. She refused visitors, except for a small circle of confidants, nursing a shattered heart that grieved not only her ruined birthday, but also the public dismantling of her son's marriage. Nate withdrew into his study, making frantic calls to Isabella's phone, calls that went straight to voicemail. He left pleading messages, alternating between apologies and declarations of love, hoping to salvage something from the wreckage. But every unanswered call was like another nail hammered into the coffin of the life he had taken for granted. Isabella had moved out, seeking refuge with her parents. She needed distance from a household that now symbolized betrayal and broken dreams. Olivia took charge of damage control. She advised her mother to lay low until the media storm passed. While the event was meant to be private, enough guests from high society had witnessed the drama that rumors spread like wildfire. The Harringtons' closest circles buzzed with speculation. Some criticized Isabella's timing, while others lauded her courage for standing up for herself. The Harrington brand, once untarnished, now stood on precarious ground. As for Vanessa Cruz, she received a barrage of calls from tabloids and gossip bloggers hungry for a headline. Feeling cornered, she issued a single statement through a hired PR representative, claiming she had no intention of disrupting any marriage and was misled about the nature of the relationship. She quickly returned to Los Angeles, hoping that physical distance would offer her some reprieve. But her real estate connections took a hit. No one wanted to risk associating with the woman who had become the poster child for an affair that rocked a prominent family. Isabella, meanwhile, found solace in her childhood bedroom, where memories of simpler times flooded back. Dr. William and Margaret enveloped her in unconditional love, providing the emotional sanctuary she desperately needed. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to breathe without the crushing weight of pretense. Sophia visited often, bearing food, compassion, and gentle encouragement. "You've done the hardest part," Sophia reminded Isabella. "You confronted him. You can move forward now, on your terms." At her parents' urging, Isabella reached out to a highly regarded divorce lawyer, Susan Delgado. In their initial consultation, Susan commended Isabella for her bravery and laid out the legal steps to finalize the separation. "You have options," Susan explained. "We can pursue a fault-based divorce if you want to establish infidelity on the record, or keep it no fault to expedite proceedings. Your evidence is strong. The question is how public you want this fight to be." Isabella considered her options, torn between anger and the desire to move on. She weighed her pride against her peace, her thirst for justice against her hunger for healing. She envisioned a future free from the cycle of suspicion and heartbreak. Yet, the sting of betrayal lingered, and some part of her wanted Nate to face the full weight of the consequences. In quiet moments, she remembered the early days of their love, how full of hope they had been, and grieved what could have been. No matter what she decided legally, Isabella vowed to preserve her dignity and well-being above all else. The illusions had been shattered. Now, as the dust settled, she began the difficult process of learning to stand tall amid the rubble of broken vows. Weeks passed and life began to reorganize itself around the aftermath of Isabella's dramatic announcement. Though the sensational buzz around the Harrington scandal gradually subsided, the key players were left to navigate a changed reality. Isabella proceeded with her divorce filings, opting for a straightforward, no-fault route, but clearly citing irreconcilable differences due to infidelity. She wanted to avoid a prolonged public battle that could drain her emotionally. Still, she made sure to protect herself financially, with Susan Delgado skillfully negotiating fair terms for spousal support and asset division. Isabella had contributed to the Harrington philanthropic wing and supported Nate's businesses in numerous ways. She had no intention of being left empty-handed. Nate, for his part, tried to make amends. He sent handwritten letters to Isabella, roses that arrived daily at her parents' house, and even tried to ambush her in person at Sophia's office. But the bridges he burned had long since collapsed into ashes, and no bouquet could bridge the chasm that now separated them. Isabella refused to see him. Each gesture felt like too little, too late, a bandage on a wound that ran too deep. She recognized his remorse, but saw it as a consequence of being caught, rather than a genuine act of contrition. The illusions were gone. Isabella saw Nate for who he truly was. During this time, Isabella leaned heavily on Sophia, who became her sounding board, cheerleader, and strategist. They discussed Isabella's future, perhaps returning to her own career, maybe even launching a consultancy of her own. Freed from the constant pressure to uphold the Harrington name, Isabella felt flickers of excitement about her newfound independence. Every dream she had once deferred, every ambition she had buried beneath expectations, now resurfaced with startling clarity. She had visions of traveling, of living life without needing permission or approval from anyone at the Wellington estate. Meanwhile, Eleanor Harrington slowly recovered from the shock. She reached out to Isabella by phone, apologizing tearfully for Nate's actions and lamenting that her birthday celebration had ended in disaster. Isabella, still fond of Eleanor, spoke with compassion but kept emotional distance. As much as she cared for her mother-in-law, she needed to focus on her own healing. Vanessa Cruz remained in Los Angeles, her professional reputation scorched. Rumors circulated that her real estate deals were falling through. Despite her initial bravado, she found herself increasingly isolated. Calls to Nate went unanswered. He, too, bore resentment toward her for appearing at his mother's party and accelerating the downfall of his marriage. Their fling ended not with fireworks, but with a slow, bitter fade into regret. With the legal process moving forward smoothly, Isabella faced the final settlement, signing with a newfound sense of peace. Dr. William Bennett and Sophia accompanied her to Susan Delgado's office, where she affixed her signature to the divorce documents. The ink bled into the paper like a final goodbye to a version of herself she no longer recognized. That's it, she thought, simultaneously relieved and nostalgic for the young bride she once was, filled with hope and belief in forever. In the crisp morning light that followed, Isabella stepped out onto the steps of the law firm and inhaled deeply. The sun's rays felt warm on her face, illuminating a path forward. For the first time in years, the road ahead belonged entirely to her. Uncharted, uncertain, but undeniably hers. No longer shackled by deception, she could begin again, on her own terms. And though the heartbreak was real, so too was the promise of a future unburdened by lies. A future in which Isabella Harrington, newly unbound, would rediscover her strength, her passion, and one day, perhaps, her capacity for love once more. Sometimes the most dazzling lives hide the most devastating secrets. Isabella's choice to announce her divorce in front of the entire Harrington family was more than a moment of heartbreak. It was a declaration of self-worth and an end to living under a shroud of deceit. Nate, once confident in his ability to juggle both his marriage and an affair, discovered too late that betrayal carries a steep price. In the end, he was left not only without a wife, but without the respect, trust, and family he once took for granted. In the aftermath, every character faced a reckoning that forced them to reevaluate not just their relationships, but their own identities. If you found yourself swept into the tumultuous currents of this story, show your support by hitting like, sharing it with friends, and subscribing to our channel. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you gripping dramas filled with emotion, conflict, and the powerful resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the only way forward is to face the truth head-on and choose yourself in the process.